Welcome back to another edition of the NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition. For those who don't know me, I am Nick from CWE and I run researchfantasy.com, and I am here to give you my top 3 plays for Tuesday, March 14th, 2017. Now, guys and girls out there watching the video, I just want to take a second and give you some advice. I've been really looking through a lot of content on YouTube in regards to daily fantasy, and there's a lot of good stuff out there. And to not cannibalize my own channel, I'm not going to suggest to you what that is, but I'm going to identify to you some things you probably want to stay away from online. On YouTube. Stay away from people selling you lineups. You don't need that. I mean, honestly, it's like the old adage, do you want to teach a man to fish so that he can catch fish, or do you want to give the man fish so he can eat, and it's a one-time deal? I know that I've modernized that slogan considerably from what it actually is, so it loses a lot of the novelty. But the reality is true. If the sites were somehow to crack down on lineup selling, which wouldn't be overly difficult because of the amount of duplicate lineups on large slates, especially, it wouldn't be too difficult to tell. They could just, suspend the accounts of the users doing that. I just don't think that's what you want to do, especially since if you lose, and you lose more often than not, you're giving someone your money to lose. Man, you got to understand why that just doesn't sound right. I'd stay away from people who just don't know what they're talking about. I'd stay away from people who tell you to play guy A, and when they do their recap the next day, they're like, well, guy A wasn't in my lineup and he bombed. So why are you telling people that you should play guy A and they weren't in your lineup? You don't think that looks a little fishy? Stay away from people who are espousing strategy and have been playing for 1 month. They don't know what they're talking about. There's so many scenarios I've seen in my 5 years of playing NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, PGA, NASCAR, college basketball, college football, the CFL. That's 10 different fantasy sports. I've taken down tournaments in all of those sports. I've seen it many, many, many times where somebody comes in with a horrible strategy, just happens to pay off one night, they win $10,000, and for the next 3 years, all you hear about is, I've won over $10,000 in fantasy sports. But the reality is, their crappy strategy won them one tournament early on, and they've been giving it back to the house ever since then. Come on, guys, you got to be a little smarter than that. I'm not trying to go in on anybody on YouTube, and it's not specifically directed toward anybody, but I've seen it more and more because everybody sees this industry. Everybody had a little bit of success. They've watched basketball, and this is specifically prevalent in the NFL because I've watched football for 25 years, so I know how it relates. Or I've played fantasy football for 20 years. I know how to play daily fantasy. That's not true. Different mentalities. I've seen many a successful season-long player come into daily fantasy and just give money every week because they know how to play, but they don't know how to play. That's the reality of this situation. Maybe I should do a strategy video, and I'm not trying to sound like a know-it-all, and you're going to know which sites are trustworthy because these are the sites that have been around the longest. They've sustained a multitude of controversy, whether it was in their control or not in their control, and they've become leaders in the industry. I hope to one day be able to get into that position. I realize I'm starting out. The decline on my end is the fact that I'm a one-man band. I don't have 15 or 20 contributors helping me. I have to, in addition to running a financial service company, I have to do all this by myself. So all I'm saying is be very cautious about what you listen to out there, because there's a lot of people who literally just have no idea what they're talking about in terms of the picks that they're giving or the strategy that they're giving. And if you want to lose money, by all means, continue down that route, but I don't want to see you do that. I have nothing to gain here necessarily by helping you, but I do. I want everybody to be able to compete. I want everybody to be able to look at what we do and say, hey, they provide a good service, especially since it's free. And that's going to end my rant today. So let's go on. Let's get on to our picks from last night, and they didn't do exceedingly well. Dwight Howard was pedestrian. That whole Hawks team just really did not show up in what was it was an ideal position for them to take against a very hurt San Antonio team, but they just didn't bring their game to play, and so he didn't turn out well. John Wall was abused at every end of the court by Ricky Rubio. Wall's effort was borderline embarrassing in the first half. He tried to turn it on in the second half. He had a nice, cute play where he spun the ball as he was falling and it went in, but unfortunately, we don't get points for trick plays, so it's irrelevant whether or not he did it well. And then Gary Harris, again, was pretty much pedestrian for what he brought to the table, and that's unfortunate because last night was a night with a lot of good value, and by 6:30 we saw all the value in guys like Vince Carter and Jeremy Lamb, Patty Mills, so on and so forth. Ivica Zubac, who I locked in, I told you guys it was going to happen. You could look back to our videos. I didn't specifically call him out as a value play, but if you read our article yesterday, he was one of the 3 centers I mentioned, and I've been touting him now for about the last week. So yeah, anyway, let's look at who our model likes today. And obviously it's a shorter slate, so let's do a little look here. I'm sorry that I'm running behind and I didn't have this open, and this video is going to run just a hair longer than I wanted it to because I do feel strongly about what I said. And I'll do a video in the coming days to kind of tilt my hand and give you more examples. All right, in the upper tier of players, our model likes Kyrie Irving, CJ McCollum, Kristaps Porzingis, Brook Lopez, Damian Lillard, Klay Thompson, Derrick Rose, Draymond Green, Drew Holiday, Russell Westbrook, Anthony Davis, Andre Drummond, DeMarcus Cousins. So that's where our tool really likes certain players. I'm going to start things out tonight with the obvious Russell Westbrook. 23-9 fantasy draft, 13-4 FanDuel, 13-4 DraftKings. And here's the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation is we're dealing with a lot of snow on the East Coast. I don't know if you can tell. Well, you definitely can't. I see it just looked white, but I'm in Youngstown, Ohio. I've got about 4 to 5 inches, maybe even 6 inches of snow overnight. It's supposed to be far worse on the East Coast where this game is being played. There's a chance this game does not get played. If it doesn't get played, obviously we know Westbrook's not in play. If it does get played, the Thunder look a little bit better. So do the Nets. I think the Nets could potentially keep this competitive. Vegas says 6 points right now in favor of the Thunder. We've seen them play down to a lot of teams. Westbrook, with the guarantee of 38 minutes, I don't care if he's 15,000. He's going to be a guy we're going to want to look at. People kind of shied a little bit on him against Phoenix the other night because, again, blowout, but it didn't happen, and he had 82 fantasy points. It's a pretty good scenario where if he gets 82 fantasy points and you don't have him, you're going to get no higher than minimum cash. So that's just food for thought. Next up, let's go Carmelo Anthony, small forward, 14K fantasy draft, 77 FanDuel, 74 DraftKings. And a lot of people are going to hear this, and again, they're going to look through the game log because people love game log hunting, and I do to an extent, but it's going to be like 10, 12% of my overall weight for a player tonight because we're not trying to be a historian. We're trying to be Nostradamus here. We're trying to look to see what's going to happen in the future. We want to use the past, but we're not going to sit here and say, well, Carmelo hasn't been doing well. So what happens when Carmelo does well? I think it's an interesting situation for Carmelo. I think he will see high ownership because, on sites like FanDuel and DraftKings, he's sitting under that 8K mark. And if you want to use Westbrook, he makes a natural pivot. Matchup is neutral against Indiana. So I think Carmelo's a guy I don't mind looking at tonight. I'm going to insert a fourth option before I go to my third, and that's DeMarcus Cousins. He's been awful since he's landed in New Orleans. It seems like every game is 9 points, 5 rebounds, an assist, and a steal in the first 5 minutes, and then 2 consecutive fouls to have him sit the remaining 7 minutes, start the second quarter, get another foul, end up on the bench until the third quarter starts. It's just been like rinse, recycle, and repeat on DeMarcus Cousins. This could change. I love the price, especially on FanDuel tonight at just 9K. He's had some games already with the Pelicans where he was 5X or greater. So I think there's some merit to using him because a lot of people really might be scared off still. And plus with guys like Westbrook and LeBron who have that much, much, much nicer floor, you could see a lot of people just willing to pay for the floor tonight. I think perhaps my favorite tournament play tonight is going to be the small forward from the Indiana Pacers, Paul George at 15-1 on Fantasy Draft, 8,100 FanDuel, 8,200 DraftKings. More or less, I just fully expect Paul George to be the man that's left out tonight. You've got Westbrook, who we talked about, who's kind of the obvious. You've got LeBron, who's got a safe floor and a good matchup against Detroit. You've got Carmelo that's priced below Paul George. It's just one of those situations where I think that people are going to say, okay, I'm going to pay up for Westbrook, look elsewhere to fill out my lineup. Or if I'm not doing that, I'm going to plop in LeBron. And then, you're maybe not looking, maybe you're trying to get 2 centers or 2 point guards or 3 of each in your DraftKings lineup. Or you're just going to say, well, I'll just drop down to Carmelo because Carmelo and George have similar ceilings, so why should I pay $800 more for George? All of those things could drop his ownership percentage. I was very heavy on him on Sunday when everyone was heavy on LeBron, and that helped me take down 20 of 20 DraftKings lineups because I actually had the pair of Carmelo and George. I think I'm going back to the well tonight. With that being said, that wraps it up for our core plays. Stay tuned for some new videos in the next couple of days because now I've got a fire lit under me to kind of back up a lot of what I said with actual advice. In the meantime, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Sign up for our NBA mailing list. Head over to Facebook. Like us there. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us next time.